Hopefully you don't hear any honking. This is a mic test. How was that? I'll bump them both up. Sure you will. Alright. Thank you, Brian. Alright, goodbye. Kyle's here, maybe 2 days ago, and he claimed he fixed the stay home, stay safe, save lives to center it, and now it was fixed, and it has went back to left center, and I don't understand.
Looking from this angle.
He probably fixed it on his.
Well, you don't have to fix it, I just don't know how it went back as well.
No, it's fine. Actually, I didn't notice that.
I carry my own bag.
Pulling it out.
Me too.
The lunchbox out of this is the last thing
I got like a little hanger.
There we go.
Does it work? Oh, it actually works. For years I wondered if that's actually a function. I was like,
This used to be when we come to the Secretary of State, you had this coolest clock that on the back there on the wall.
This whole thing was it separated into an office, or it was all?
This is all one big, there used to be the big table that the prisoners made that's across the street. Now it's set like right over there.
Oh,
People, when they come in and
sure.
file, they would, it's over there, I think it's Secretary of State over at the memorial building now. I don't know. Yeah, on the opposite side.
Well, what was that? This is closet?
It's like a, yeah. He'd go
Did he
in
have a
there.
reception in there? I was trying to figure out how someone would actually.
I think there might have been a desk right over there, but
Okay.
that's all I'm not sure. But yeah, it was, this is where you come, and I don't know.
Because if they're just putting people up that served in this room, or where's who?
That's true. Because Jack Fryers, when I first started, he was one I remember because he always did the Muskegon District Telethon. For some reason, he had some time, he would do the telethon with us. But yeah, and then the grades and.
I figured Shanahan put that day.
Oh, this day. Yeah, no, I saw that.
That's Robert special.
Because that's Shannon, and I don't think they were married.
Yeah.
I think they were.
When did that year start?
I can't figure that out.
I mean,
Keep those headphones off when we get sweaty ears as it is. I think I put that converter in the pocket from my phones.
off of the head.
Found a piece of candy on that, so
There you go.
I had more big in my pocket for that converter. Don't want to lose my mask.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm ready now. Two things, actually. Coffee or it's not one.
Yeah, I was like,
You're good.
Yeah, I'm taking the time every day.
I think Maria said she called you that time because we went to the fire department and she was like 99, which
They got their thing about. She
they
told me
were like,
right there.
another guy's like, you're good, you're still within the parameters.
Well, and that's when I was like, I don't want to
Yeah,
for.
yeah, wherever you want.
Since they're like 460 feet away, the big old flames, they're not within a degree.
And are you our interpreter? When you get done. Could I have, it's not about where she's gonna, I just wanted to make sure that I'll be able to see you in my shot over here. Because
You're-
one day we did, and our phones started ringing off the hook.
Yes,
All right, very good, thank you.
it's where that tape is wonderful. You guys have it done to a science now, I'm sure. Good. Deaf Kansans are appreciative.
Celia, can I thank
I
you?
think I'm gonna stay in here. I mean, wanna go back out to my car, well, that's what's going on.
Right.
I mean, I know you're gonna have to keep for 6, so. Yeah, exactly. It just wouldn't be worth it. Too much effort.
Yeah, I couldn't find either trooper who had the car in there, so, well, actually, I talked to the guy at the front desk, and he did find. So, yeah, I can't, I was gonna have to get him and me. He has a radio, he can call somebody. They said he was going on, and I said, yeah, keep this good.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's always my rule, get stuck somewhere where you can't get out. Yeah. Get these microphone cords.
Well, that's Cambridge, good luck, Cambridge.
I was told they weren't here because.
Well, they're 12, right? Yeah, that's good.
See, they're supposed to be there when John's.
Yeah, good luck. I mean, they got here in time, but they're going the wrong way.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. No, sorry, yeah.
They're gonna
I'm
be
trying
asking
to
for
wipe
copies, and then
everything.
Sean's gonna be on the.
I know, it's very smart.
Can you get it done for me over there?
Things back a little.
Right? As you know. Oh, yeah. It's the same thing.
What is up with this?
Come on. I just got, there's three things, I'll go that way down. I'm like, this thing, yes, it.
So do you have this? Do you end up with an extra,
Oh, I'm
like,
fine, but
you get by with extra stuff? I can still remember back years ago, long time ago,
I see we coordinated our colors today.
Yes. These are my high school colors.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We will start, as we always do, with the hardest part of the daily briefing. As of today, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment has announced that we now have 2,482 positive cases of COVID-19 in Kansas, and that is up 271 from yesterday. We now have 74 out of 105 counties with positive cases, and at this point, 112 Kansans have died, and that's up 2 from yesterday. Meanwhile, there are 2 pieces of good news, however, from the Kansas Department of Labor. The first is that the federal pandemic unemployment compensation, which provides an additional $600 weekly payment for unemployment insurance claimants, went live starting today. It is part of the Federal CARES Act, which is focused on expanding unemployment benefits in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis. A processing issue that has delayed implementation of the $600 weekly payment has been resolved, and the Department of Labor will be processing more than $3.4 million in benefits today. In addition, and in an effort to help Kansans who put their health and lives on the line during the COVID-19 pandemic, I have directed the Department of Labor to evaluate all of its processes and procedures for handling worker compensation claims filed by law enforcement, firefighters, emergency medical service providers, and healthcare workers that are reasonably related to the pandemic. Department of Labor will draft and submit a temporary regulation and develop potential legislation designed to create workers' compensation coverage for our first responders and healthcare workers who contract COVID-19 while assisting in the state's response to the pandemic. The regulation and proposed legislation will create a presumption that first responders and healthcare workers who contract COVID-19 contracted the disease arising out of and in the course of their employment. I'll let Secretary Garcia provide you with additional details on both, but before doing that, I do want to take a minute to thank the folks at the Kansas Division of Emergency Management and the Kansas National Guard for their dedicated service during this trying time. You rarely hear about the Kansas Division of Emergency Management. They're a very small, yet very experienced team of professionals who respond to emergency situations across the state, whatever that emergency might be. On March 12th, KDEM fully activated the State Emergency Operations Center to centrally coordinate the state's COVID-19 response across various state agencies, private partners, and the local emergency managers and public health officials. In times of crisis, the state has a variety of tools and assets it can deploy to provide assistance to local units of government, and it is KDEM's responsibility to coordinate those efforts. Since its activation, KDEM has coordinated a variety of responses across the state, including purchasing and distributing personal protective equipment to medical facilities and first responders, expanding testing across the state, and supporting food distribution to those in need. To help meet the growing demand, KDEM has purchased and transported 18,000 prepared food packets to local food banks statewide. And they're working to find new meal sources to meet the very heavy increased demand. Additionally, KDEM is coordinating with the Kansas Department for Children and Families and community partners to distribute food to Kansans as part of the Disaster Household Distribution Program. This effort was established through DCF's existing network of temporary emergency food assistance program agencies. To help with the logistics of all of this, they rely on members of the Kansas National Guard. For example, here in Topeka and in Kansas City, some members of the Guard are working in the harvester's warehouse, moving pallets of food and helping pack boxes to distribute to those in need because of the unprecedented unprecedented demand we've seen at food banks in recent weeks. The Kansas National Guard is also helping to support medical professionals at the Lansing Correctional Facility, and today will be assisting local public health departments with COVID-19 testing at locations across the state. The Guard is one of the many resources available that we can use to support counties as needed. They are a unique response component with both a state and federal mission. We often associate the Guard with national disaster responses, but they do so much more. In fact, the seal of the National Guard is always ready, always there. And Kansans should be proud and grateful to know that they were ready and they are there for us. And I want to thank them all for their service. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Secretary of Labor, Delia Garcia.
Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon. Yes, the Kansas Department of Labor is making progress this week for Kansans in need. And I want to share some positive steps with you today that we've been taking to move us forward. First, as the Governor acknowledged, we are excited to announce that the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, also known as FPUC, which provides additional $600 weekly payment for unemployment insurance to claimants that went live today. And we know that because we are already getting comments from claimants that are excited about that. And as part of the Federal CARES Act, FPUC is a $600 payment that is made each week in addition on top of their other employment benefits that the eligible claimant may receive. I would like to list what those others are. So individuals who are eligible for the $600 payments is between the time of March 29th and July 25th. And if they're already receiving one from one of these categories, whether it's one, the regular benefits, which is the state unemployment, 2, the shared work program, 3, the trade readjustment assistance, 4, disaster unemployment assistance, 5, the pandemic unemployment assistance, or 6, the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation. So if you're eligible, you're automatically going to receive the FPUC payment, so you do not need to add an additional application, and the retroactive payments for prior weeks after the law went into effect of March 29th will be following soon after. The second piece of information I'd like to share with you is in mid-March, the legislature passed a temporary extension to increase the number of weeks an individual would be eligible for unemployment benefits from up to 16 weeks to now 26 weeks for claims filed after January 1 of this year. So if you are eligible, you will automatically receive the benefits extension. No application or process is required other than filing your weekly claims. So those impacted will receive new monetary determinations that include the additional 10 weeks worth of benefits. And third, the governor references as well as the Kansas Department of Labor has drafted and submitted a temporary regulation and is preparing for potential legislation designed to create the workers' compensation coverage for our first responders. The regulation proposed legislation will create a presumption for first responders and healthcare workers that contract the COVID-19 arising out of their work, where they're at in employment. And we are working with senators right now to get this legislation drafted and introduced at the time of consideration when the legislature is at the next possible opportunity. And finally, I am proud to announce the availability of our Spanish language website at www.getkansasbenefits.gov. When I started a year ago, I wanted to increase availability of materials in Spanish, and we took major steps forward in doing this with our website and other materials being available in Spanish. So you can now file your weekly claims, check your claim status, and view the FAQs all in Spanish just by clicking at the top right-hand corner on the Español button. The first translated Spanish pages actually launched last week, and then this week more content was added. And we will be continuing to update and contain more Spanish language resources as they are being developed. These are all good steps forward, and we will continue our efforts to get benefits to all of our Kansans in need as quickly as possible. And I'd like to thank all of the partners who have been helping us get to this point, and I'd like to stand for any questions. Thank you.
Questions?
Secretary, can you explain how money is going out right now? Is it direct deposit right now, and then checks might take longer, and then back pay? How will that work? It's not all at once.
Yes, so the question is that how's the money being, so the money is automatically, if you're already eligible and receiving, it's automatically hitting their bank accounts today. If you have the debit card, you should receive that probably by Friday, by tomorrow. And then at latest, if your direct deposit is no problems, you should probably receive that as well tomorrow, at latest on Monday. And back payment will be continuing, like if you did that yesterday, if you filed yesterday, it's automatically going to go through. However, if you did it like 2 or 3 weeks ago and there may be a back payment, you will still get the payment just later.
So it's not like if someone's going to get $1,800 today,
Not today.
like in the following.
Yes.
Governor, with all due respect to your anniversary, the word maybe didn't get it to the folks outside. They have some rather choice words for you: tyrant, fascist, dictator among them. You might have a chance to respond to some of that.
Okay, so you're asking me how I'm responding to all the names I was called today?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, Brad, one of the things that many people don't know is that I actually used to work with adolescents, and so there is no name in the book that I haven't been called at some point in my life.
Some of the program staff there were wondering, well, not wondering, saying that you should go out and speak to them. What is your message to them?
I think I've been pretty consistent in my message to them, is that I understand their frustration. I really, truly do. I'm as frustrated with this, and I wish that I could just snap my fingers and have this all over with, but we can't do that. We really do have to pay attention to the science, pay attention to the reality on the ground, and reopen our economy as health indicators allow. I've spent this entire week and will next week working with our industries across the state. Today I was on the phone with the hospitality industry, so our restaurants, hotels, our tourism industry. I've been on the phone with all the chambers, with the small business folks. We're really talking with all of them in preparation for lifting the stay-home order on May 3rd. As I've said before, we may not be able to do that, but it's our intent to do that. And so we're working with all of our different sectors across the state to put into place some base guidelines that will work, but will be very clear so there's no confusion in preparation for that moment. It can't come soon enough, but we also can't rush it.
Governor, the whole issue with the stimulus money is still sort of playing out in D.C., and now all of a sudden the Republican leadership and even some members of your delegation here are sort of reticent about the idea of giving you money, or any state money that can be used to offset the revenue declines that everybody's going to see. How much support do you think you can count on from the state's congressional delegation to try to get that stimulus money or get some flexibility that would allow you to backfill the holes that everybody's facing?
We have had a lot of support from our congressional delegation, particularly Senator Robertson, Senator Moran. We've had multiple conversations with them. I think our congressional delegation is very well aware that it's imperative that states and local units of government be given some assistance to backfill those revenue holes that have occurred. If you think back to the recession in 2007, 8, 9, the federal government did exactly that. They sent funds back here that allowed us to fill some of the holes so that we didn't have to so drastically cut education. We didn't have to cut our Medicaid program. It was necessary then. It's probably even more necessary now because the holes are bigger.
Are you in a worse position now? Because in 08, 09, there was avenues. You could raise revenues, which I don't know how possible that is given where we're at now, but now you're sort of having to cut and increase spending because you're going to have more demands potentially on unemployment insurance, Medicaid, other services. So can you address that? It seems like not just you, but all states are a little bit in a trap here in that they're losing money at the same time when they have to spend money to deal with the pandemic.
Well, stimulus 3, I think, addressed the issue of having to spend more money. You know, we will get assistance from the federal government for COVID-related expenses. So that's in place. What's not in place yet, and what needs to be in place, is to be able to backfill the revenue holes that have been caused by some of the actions that we've had to take because of this, you know, extending income tax filing deadlines, just from the shutdown of our businesses and the revenue that's no longer being generated, whether it's the sales tax or the withholding tax, all of those kinds of things. We've got to have some assistance on that, because, you know, we are right now, we just got the consensus revenue estimates. We know we're down 1.3 billion for the end of this fiscal year and then into next. We've got to fill those holes. And you're right, I'm in a very different situation than we were in 2007, 8, 9 because of what happened with the tax cuts in 2012 and 2013, where in order to fill the holes created by those, we had to go rob every bank, every piggy bank we had in the state. So all of those usual, you know, sort of cushions or stopgap measures that we could use to fill the holes are no longer there. You know, so we're starting with an empty piggy bank, essentially. So we've got to get the assistance from the feds if we're going to be able to weather this storm.
Governor, why is there such a big increase in COVID cases today?
You know, I wish Dr. Norman were here, but my guess is what happened is that there was some delay on some test responses from some of the labs, and that we now have those in, and that's what's adding to it.
Have you heard anything back from the federal injunction hearing, and kind of wanted to piggyback on that? One earlier this morning.
You know, I haven't heard a thing about that today. You know, I've been paying attention a lot more to starting the phase-in of our opening up of the economy. So I really don't have any idea exactly what's going on. I think that I think they put some additional, defendants on there. So, but I don't know what has changed.
Governor Casey Starson in a question. In California, nursing home operators and healthcare companies are lobbying the state's governor for a sweeping order to provide immunity to nursing homes and long-term care facilities from administrative and civil liability from lawsuits arising from COVID-19. Have you or your administration received a similar request in Kansas, and what would your response be?
I don't believe that we have received such a request. One could always come in, and should that come in, you know, we will look at it and we will address that, you know, on Kansas, with a Kansas focus. We'll see what we need to do. You know, our situation, our nursing homes, you know, we clearly have clusters, but we're not in the same position as a number of other states are. So we'll see if that becomes an issue here. We'll deal with it with a Kansas focus.
Governor, I have a question from Fox 4 about patient overflow hospitals. Are you considering sending the Kansas National Guard to help with Kansas City area hospitals if they're getting overwhelmed there at all? Do you know that?
I don't think that's necessary at the moment. You know, I've had conversations with our CEOs in our hospitals just recently this week, and they are very comfortable that, you know, they can handle what's out there right now. Obviously, that can change. You know, if something comes out and we spike significantly, but I'm very comfortable with the capacity that we have right now across the state that we could deal with a surge in a particular area by some shuffling around of folks.
Would that be up to you to send the National Guard there to help out?
Well, I am the one who, you know, would order the National Guard to go there, but I would do that based upon input from our hospitals and our public health officials.
Secretary Garcia, when can self-employed Kansans expect to see claims, and what does that process look like?
So for the self-employed, that would be the program PUA, which is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. We just started those steps in putting those in this week, and that progress is going through. Rough amount, and again, this is an honest answer, would be anywhere from being optimistic, 3 at most 6 weeks of getting that through. Anybody who is applying for that would receive retro money, so if they're waiting for that now, that's when that would go into effect.
Can you talk about the process of getting the $600 out, kind of what took so long? And then could that process or the money, could that run dry at any point from the federal government? Could you send out too much?
Yes. So about the $600, would it run dry? No, that would not. What got the reason why it took so long for the $600, as I've mentioned before, our system being a little older and being held up by Band-Aids, we have tried and tried and tried, and it was the system that we had an issue with our rockets, which is the mechanism that carries information from our website to the mainframe. That's where we were having issues. But thanks to the governor's help, when we had the SWAT team come in and check, an IT SWAT team come in and alleviate some of the stress off of the website, we were able to make some enhancements within starting to getting things moving, including then allowing us to input the $600 code, which is now moving.
Governor, on the healthcare EO from yesterday, 2 questions on that. One, does it go too far in making the regulations too lax on healthcare providers in that, in a first glance, it seemed pretty sweeping in terms of the restrictions it eased for healthcare workers, and I've heard some concern that maybe that went too far. Secondly, there's a sense that maybe it didn't go far enough on liability, and that there's a number of physicians out there who right now aren't doing elective treatments that are intended to be, you obviously understand the question, so.
I do understand the question, Brad, and this is one of those cases where, you know, if you've made everybody angry, you must be doing something right, because we have. You know, we put out that executive order to respond to what we know to be increased demands on our health workers in the healthcare environment. So we wanted to ease up some, you know, restrictions on practice so that we could have more folks out there responding to the increase in healthcare needs. You know, I hear the part on the immunity. You know, there are only so many things that we can do from an administrative point of view. Some of that has got to be legislative, and we'll be working with the legislature on that.
Stormont-Vail says they're getting to reach their peak, and Shawnee County Health says that they've reached their peak as well. Coming back to hospitals a little bit, you said you talked to a lot of the other hospitals around Kansas, and you're pretty comfortable with how we're going to be able to handle this, but what would that look like? If Stormont's reaching their peak and they're going to have to send other people to places, what have those hospitals told you that would look like?
Are you talking about Stormont reaching their peak in terms of the number of folks that they can actually handle within the system? Okay, that, you know, actually the conversations that I've been having with the hospitals is that most of them were feeling pretty comfortable that they were at a position to resume things like elective surgeries and elective procedures and regular appointments. So I'm not familiar with Stormont having a sense that they're going to run out of capacity. I'll check on that. But you know, clearly, if that is an issue, we'll work with them and figure out a resolution. You know, we do have another healthcare facility here in Topeka. There might be some ability to do some transferring if that's necessary, but I don't know that to be a problem. In fact, just the opposite. There are a number of hospitals who are really ready to get back to doing some of the elective surgeries and regular appointments that they've had before. So we'll check on it, but I think we're okay.
Governor, how close is Kansas to having the testing supplies it needs to do the testing needed to start reopening the economy?
We are nowhere near where we need to be with testing supplies. It's the biggest frustration that I have. You know, we have taken some steps to deal with some of the testing-related issues. For instance, I know that Dr. Norman has talked about how we've gobbled up all of these 3D printers from dental offices in order to produce our own swabs because we weren't getting those. We did get some testing supplies that came in response to the issues in Southwest Kansas. The CDC really did ship in thousands of test kits, so we were able to respond to that emergency. But just in terms of regular shipments of tests and test supplies that we need, we continue to not get that response. We did just get told by FEMA that we really shouldn't be going through them. That was news to us. We should be going through the CDC. So we've turned our attention back to the CDC and we're working directly with them. But I'm also looking at other innovative ways to make sure that we get those test kits into the state of Kansas. It's imperative if we're going to be able to lift that stay-home order. You know, I think there are 3 guidelines that have come out, even from the White House, that we've got to have testing, we've got to have contact tracing, and we've got to have the surge supply in the hospitals should something happen. So I think we're good on the hospitals. I think KDHE is putting together a very robust contact tracing, but the kits, the testing kits, are still the barrier that we have right now. So I'm looking down a lot of rabbit holes trying to figure out how we can get those test kits here. We need them.
Governor, are you worried about what you saw outside when it comes to social distancing? Maybe over 1,000 people fairly close to each other. Do you think that could spike cases?
I certainly hope not. You know, it's not a good idea to do that. And I wouldn't have recommended it, but we'll hope that those folks all get home safe and sound.
Governor, is there a possibility that schools may not reopen in the fall? Is the Board of Education developing an online plan for this, and do you worry students will fall behind?
Well, we hope that our schools will be able to open in August. And you know, given how we're going, I'm cautiously optimistic that that will happen. You know, as we phase in sort of the lifting of the orders, we'll do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. I think if we can get to phase 3, it would allow our schools to reopen. But I think we have to be prepared because there's lots of chatter about a new wave hitting in the fall. So looking into October, November, I think we've got to be ready. You know, fortunately, you know, Kansas put in what has really become sort of the gold standard for continuous learning guidelines. You know, we were the first to shut the schools down for the whole school year. Our teachers and our administrators put together a really robust online learning program, academic packets to go. We've got school nutrition programs going. We've got continuation of mental health services. The ability of our schools to provide for some child care for frontline workers. So we have the model. I hope that we don't have to use it in August, but if the wave comes back in October or November, we already know what to do, and we could revert to that. So I want the schools open. I want Friday night football. I want all of that to happen, and that's our goal, but we're going to be prepared for either one.
Governor, at this point, after the events of yesterday with the LCC and the tit for tat that was sort of going back, that's got a bigger issue obviously at play, how would you size up your relationship right now with the legislature, particularly the conservative Republican element of the legislature?
Well, I always like to separate it out. You know that the rank and file legislature, I think, I have a very good relationship with. You know, obviously, there's been some, as you say, tit for tat with legislative leadership. I think that even with all of that playing out in the public, I still maintain a decent working relationship with a number of them. You know, I was in the legislature for a long time. I know how that all works. I understand the politics of it. I don't have time to play the politics back. I just have time to do this job. And so that's how I will continue to operate, is just focus on getting us through this in the best possible manner. And, you know, as I think you know, we're looking at all our options to deal with some of the issues that were raised by the legislature or the LCC sort of adjourning and not coming back till after May 1st. But
do you have any update on
options are?
We've got a number of things that we're looking at. I've got as I said yesterday, I've got my legal team looking at that. We want to make sure that whatever we do is within the bounds of the law, and that the timing of that is appropriate. So, I can't really give you any details right now. I just want you to know we're looking. We fully expect that we'll be able to come up with an option to allow us to continue under the emergency declaration, because if we couldn't, it would talk about a disaster. That would be a disaster.
One more question?
When calculating a 14-day downward trend to kind of begin phase one of reopening and kind of changing things, does a spike like today's throw things off, or does Kansas account for those numbers when accounting for those?
Well, I'll need to talk with our public health folks or epidemiologists, because of the reason there was such a huge spike, we may be able to throw that out as an outlier and look at the underlying numbers.
Do the delay in the testing, is that playing into that?
As a delay in getting the results back was what played into that much. I think we did have the testing going on, but some of it was the Abbott testing, which is sort of an instant turnaround, right away. Others had to go into labs, and getting those test results back were delayed.
Thank you.
I'll share your anniversary plans with the world.
The same thing I did yesterday, and the same thing I figure I'll be doing tomorrow.
Hey, you're the only one I see every week, so other than my wife.
I know.
This is like a special occasion to get out of the house.
Sad, isn't it?